In today's video, I'm going to cover the whole entire market in terms of Dow Jones, Nasdaq, and S&P 500, including the economic calendar. Now, I do post these videos daily, so I highly encourage you to double check on X and YouTube for my latest videos, so that way you have the most up-to-date information. And before I get to the technical analysis portion, I'm going to go over the economic calendar and a little bit of context for today. The markets did go down just basically because Biden administration is considering tougher trade restrictions if companies continue granting China access to US-made technology, and it looks like tariff rate of semiconductors will increase from 25% to 50% by 2025, supposedly. So we'll see. But because of that, some stocks got hit pretty heavily in terms of the semiconductors and so on and so forth. And we saw, for example, Nasdaq / looking at QQQ, which is an ETF for Nasdaq, so just different ratios, dropped down negative 2.94%. And the S&P dropped down negative 1.4%. Now the Dow Jones did go up 0.59% positive, and indications are still somewhat pointing to the upside for the Dow Jones. But I'm going to go over the economic calendar first before I get to those. And so for Thursday, July 18th at 8:30 a.m., we have initial jobless claims, as well as Philadelphia Fed manufacturing survey. At 10 a.m., we have U.S. leading economic indicators, as well as Chicago Fed President Austan Goolsbee speak. At 1:45 p.m., we have Dallas Fed President Logan speak. 6:05 p.m., we have San Francisco Fed President Daly speak. And 7:45 p.m., we have Fed Governor Michelle Bowman speak. Now, in terms of the breakdown, for the S&P and Nasdaq, they're potentially showing further downside based off MACD lines, but they are potentially at a bouncing level. But I'm going to go over the Dow Jones first and then go over the rest of them. So if you look at the MACD lines, this indicates if it's a bearish or bullish movement. And right now it is in the bearish movement for 1 month. And let me just zoom out too in case you're a new viewer, because we have an upward trend resistance line dating back since 2021, upward trend support levels dating back since 2021 as well. But if you zoom in right about here, the touch points for the two that we saw earlier becomes 4, and then there was an upward trend support level dating back since April of 2024. We broke through the 2021 upward trend resistance level and been going up. Now, it looks like there's going to be potentially a continuation to the upside, maybe not necessarily the short term, because tomorrow might be somewhat of a consolidation, small dip, and then start going up. Because if you look at the MACD lines, the 1 month showing is bearish movement, so a little bit of a downside. 3-month chart arching to the downside. It is in the bullish movement, but potentially crossing over, it looks like. Mind you, we're at 41,198 points. And then the 6-month chart is in the bullish movement, but potentially trying to arch down a little bit. So that's the reason why I'm thinking most likely it's going to be somewhat of a consolidation, small dip in the beginning part of the trading day, potentially. And then ultimately, the Dow Jones, it looks like, if you look at the 5-year all chart, basically, all-time highs, right? So zooming into the 1-year chart, it's in the bullish movement and it looks pretty strong still, right? The indications are not slowing down for the MACD line. And the 5-year chart, likewise, just started in the bullish movement. So indications to the upside still look like they're going to be further to the upside, basically, for the Dow Jones. Just for temporary price points right now, potentially consolidation. Now, if it dips down, we could come down to 41,063 points, give or take, and within the zone about 40,850 or 40,730, give or take. But there is a chance, I personally don't think it's going to drop down this low, but if the markets tend to drop a lot for example, S&P and Nasdaq, it could be enough to potentially have the Dow Jones come down too at one point. But like we saw today, Dow Jones went up regardless, while Nasdaq and S&P went down. So if you were thinking it's going to go bounce off this upward trend resistance level dating back since 2021, and then bounce off to the upside, continuing the 1-year and 5-year chart for the MACD line, you're looking at roughly a level of about 40,330 points, give or take. But I'm not anticipating that personally, but that's basically it for the Dow Jones. Now for the S&P, I'm going to look over the ETF SPY, which is the same thing as the S&P, it's just different ratio. And basically, we've had crazy drops. Are we going to stabilize potentially at this level? There is a chance we could stabilize. Mind you, we closed at $556.94. If we go to the upside, I'm going to cover the downside too, but we're going to probably potentially have issues passing the first moving average of $59.90, which coincidentally, the clean number is about $560. Will pretty much act as resistance. Then the next level is about $561 and some change, which we saw a consolidation range of resistance throughout that time. Then the next level we'd be looking at, and I'm ideally looking at this, I'm going to just highlight it right about here, We saw 1, 2, 3 consolidation touch point right about here, but 3 touch points plus somewhat of a consolidation touch point here. And you're looking at pretty much, give or take, about $563 and some change resistance. And then going to the all-time high zone, about 564 and some change, essentially 565, because it's on the 565 low side, showing 565 and 10 cents. Now to the downside, we could have potentially support at 555 and some change. And that's based off of the touch point consolidation here, touch point here, and then crossing over to the moving average right about here. We could have support at the high 554 and some change, so pretty close to the 555 and some change. Now the next level after that, you could think that probably the 554 and some change on the low end will hold. I just personally don't think so, because if it ends up dropping quite a bit, we could just see same movements like we saw today, and it's a big drop, and we're heading down to the 550 and some change as support. Could we go lower? Potentially, but I don't think it'll go any lower than that, because I think these levels that I mentioned earlier would be causing somewhat of a slowdown / consolidation a little bit, and then drop down to 550. But we'll see. But now for the S&P, in terms of MAC lines, it's the reason why I'm thinking it's not going to drop that fast potentially is because MAC line for the 1 month is in the bullish movement, showing to the upside. 3 month is in the bearish and potentially could come down. 6 month bearish, but then the 1 year is in the bullish still, and it's potentially going to cross over. So I think it's going to hold on to this a little bit before it actually drops down fully, but that's just my opinion. But then there's one thing that contradicts it though. If you look at, for example, Nvidia, which did drop quite a bit today, well, actually not necessarily contradicts it, but we could, in essence, I guess it backs it up, because I thought this was another stock. I think it was looking at Tesla or something like that. But for Nvidia, this is, if you go back 5 years chart, so right about here in 2017, there's an upward trend resistance line. We had some false breakouts though previously, and then got knocked down by the upward trend resistance line, got knocked down as well by the upward trend resistance line in 2024. This was November of 2021, and right now we're meeting it right now potentially to either bounce off it or break through it. So if Nvidia keeps dropping, then the markets will obviously get pulled down. So then that 550 and some change I gave for the S&P, it's pretty much going to see it, right? Again, that's just my opinion. And Nvidia has room to drop essentially, right? You could probably drop down to, like, let's say the moving, or let me give the moving average actually, because it's not a guarantee it'll drop down, but it's about $73 and some change. And then if you look at the MAC lines for Nvidia, it is showing a bounce up potentially for the 1 month, 3 month curving up. So potentially this could be a bounce up. 6 month, not really guaranteed to be a bounce up. But then the 1 year and the 5 year, the 1 year looks like a massive potential still continuous drop. And then, but at the same time, for the 1 year, we're at the moving average too, by the way, around the 114 and some change. So that could hold up. And then the 5 year, it's arching down potentially to further downside. So we could be seeing, I would be shocked if we saw the $74 price point, but we'll see. Anything's possible. Now for QQQ, which is ETF for Nasdaq. This is the biggest heavy hitter, like I covered yesterday, in terms of actually showing downside, because Dow Jones was showing upside as of yesterday. S&P was showing somewhat consolidation / upside in the longer term, but then it got flipped today based off of the Biden administration with the Chinese tariffs, with the news and all that stuff. But the Nasdaq was actually showing downside regardless of that news. And right now we're at $481 and some change. And if you look at the MAC lines, 1 month is upward trend resistance line, MAC line showing bullish movement. So technically you could go up from this level based off the 1 month, but the 3 month, it still has ways to go, even though it's trying to cross over to a bullish movement. 6 month, it's still relatively somewhat strong, I'd say, for the 6 month, indicating still somewhat difficulties to cross over. And then the 1 year is a strong drop in terms of bearish movement. And then 3 month or 5 years, it's still in the bullish movement, but potentially crossing over to bearish movement. The significance of the level it's at right now for the market is this is an upward trend resistance line dating back since 2010 for the Nasdaq. Now the S&P does show some kind of similar channel. So, but actually, just to quickly show for the S&P, this dates back since 2010. And the reason why I want to show this quickly is because has the same channel, essentially support levels, resistance levels, so on and so forth, but we have room to grow for the S&P. Now for the Nasdaq, again, looking at QQQ, which again, we closed at 481 and some change, We did break out before through the upward trend resistance line. It's since 2020 to 2022. So it's not like we don't have room to grow. We do, but the indications are kind of pointing to the downside. Like I stated, with the 1 year chart showing a strong drop potentially, and a 5 year chart probably crossing over. But in terms of 1 month, 3, 6, yeah, it's potentially dropped. So the way the 1 month, 3 month, and 6 month personally for me are showing is that upward trend resistance line dating back since 2010. That's what it is. Since 2010, we did break through it. So this was the time we broke through it, and that is back in June 12th of 2024. I think inflation numbers came out that day. We broke through it and stayed above it for quite some time. So what could happen is we could come down one more trading day, so tomorrow, and then potentially bounce off that upward trend support level dating back since 2010, or hit this level right about here. Maybe not the cleanest line, but we had resistance, support. Let me zoom in a little bit more. Resistance, support, support, support. So resistance, arguably support there, but I wouldn't really count it. Somewhat resistance zone right here. So we could have a false breakout to this upward trend resistance line / support line that dates back, I would say it was more prevalent around November of 2023. So potentially come down to this level, maybe have some kind of bounce at $475. That's what the upward trend resistance line is. Mind you, it depends on when we hit that level, by the way. The longer we take, the higher the low will be. But right now, if we're looking at it right now, it's about $475, give or take, and some change. And then potentially bounce off a little bit and then come down after the bounce. And then we're going down to 473 and some change. And then maybe go up and maybe even have difficulties passing the 475 and some change, and then go up finally and go back up to the upside. Now, the only thing is I will say the 1 year chart is not showing a full bounce because it's showing a stronger downside like we saw right here. It's pretty strong and it's early to the game. Plus you can see the volume, it's pretty massive in terms of selling. But anything's possible in terms of, for example, let's just say some good news happens in terms of the market, or Tesla earnings next week is just pretty massive and the stock just ends up flying somehow. Anything's possible, right? But yeah, there's that. So besides those levels to the upside, in case you want to, if you think it's going to go to the upside, the first level of resistance that we saw before was resistance here, give or take. And I think there was a small consolidation resistance level right there, or support, and that's about $486 and some change. Then the next level is about 490 and some change. Then the moving average is about 492 and some change, 493 and some change, 495 and some change. And then after that, we would have to pretty much be on the zone to pass, give or take. And that's looking at roughly about 499 and some change, the 500 zone. So $499 and $500, that pretty much is going to be difficult to pass. And then we're looking at 503 and some change, with where it consolidated pretty much near the all-time high, and then the all-time high in the pre-market was 505 and some change. That's basically it for today's video. Thanks again for watching. I do appreciate it. If you did find it helpful, again, consider dropping a like. It does help the channel, so thank you so much for that. I do appreciate it. And consider subscribing so you'll be notified when I do upload these videos on X and YouTube. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care. Peace.